I was 20,000 feet over El Paso, surrounded by massive thunderstorms in a Lear 24, when a routine training flight turned into a fight for our lives. This is how one single, deadly oversight nearly ended it all.
At the time, I only had about 200 hours in the Lear. But it was honest time. No relying on autopilots back then. Between the basic 1960s instruments and systems that were temperamental at best, I was hand flying from takeoff to touchdown.
The story begins in Carson City, Nevada, during the late 1980s. I was due for my first officer annual, Part 135, Recurrent training in the Lear 24. We just happened to have a Part 91 flight scheduled to deliver some parts to El Paso, Texas. So we decided to combine my training with the delivery to save money. The check pilot gave me an oral quiz, had me pre-flight the aircraft, calculate our V numbers, and file the flight plan. The check pilot was the pilot flying for the first half of the trip, while I acted as pilot monitoring. An hour in, we switched, and I took the controls. It was summertime, so the weather was clear until we hit New Mexico, where massive thunderstorms began building ahead of us. As we neared El Paso, the storms were everywhere. We asked to deviate due to weather, but our options were limited by the Mexican border. We were cruising at 41,000 feet, but the buildups topped out over 50,000 feet. We weren't in the clouds. We were just weaving around the towering giant buildups. Normally, we'd start our descent 100 miles out, but center held us high because the airspace around El Paso was pure chaos. Virtually every jet arriving or departing El Paso was requesting deviations. The airport itself was VFR with excellent visibility, but the surrounding storms made standard arrivals impossible. To follow the published procedures would have sent us straight into a cell. The controllers were overloaded, handling all IFR traffic via vectors to VFR landings and departures. As we dodged our way into the El Paso area, we finally got our descent clearance. Just after finishing the descent checklist and descending through 20,000 feet with the airport in sight, we hit moderate to severe turbulence. The Learjet handles rough air well because of its wing loading, but I was hand flying because the older autopilots couldn't handle these conditions anyway. It was so violent that anything not tied down was flying around the cabin, and the rear of the plane was producing loud, rumbling sounds as we skipped through the rough air. Communicating was nearly impossible. If your hands weren't white-knuckling the yoke, they were hitting the cockpit ceiling. We couldn't even run the before-landing checklist because we couldn't hold it steady enough to read it. Fortunately, we could still hear the air traffic controller through our headsets. We approached the airport 15,000 feet too high. The controller apologized for keeping us up so high and amended our clearance to fly beyond the field and execute a 180-degree turn back to enter a left downwind for runway 22. As we got lower, the turbulence finally eased a bit. We were playing catch-up, trying to catch up with our before-landing checklist and landing configuration. Just as I turned downwind at 165 knots indicated, well above our stall speed, the stick shaker went off. Warning of an imminent stall. At our current pattern altitude of 1,000 feet above the ground, there was virtually no chance of recovery from a full-on stall. Stall training in a Lear was stall avoidance. You have to recognize the onset of a stall and power your way out of it before you stall, not after. I immediately pushed the thrust levers forward to fly out of the imminent stall. I shouted to the other pilot, "What's happening?" Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him flip a switch on the center console and yell, "Oh shit, the boards!" During our final descent, while we were trying to lose altitude quickly, the check pilot had extended the spoilers. However, he failed to tell me, and then forgot to retract them. Commonly, when deploying the spoilers, the crew member would keep his finger on the guard over the spoiler switch while the spoilers were extended, so as not to forget they were extended. Under normal circumstances, I or any other pilot would have caught the spoilers extended light, or the change in speed, pitch, and sound. This being the worst turbulence of my career, my entire focus was just keeping the aircraft upright and under control. So I missed it. It was impossible for the other pilot to keep his finger in the switch guard or even change radio frequencies due to the turbulence. Once the spoilers were retracted, I came back on the power and transitioned to flying a normal pattern. We finished the last checklist and made an uneventful landing and taxied to the ramp.
The scary truth. Conditions don't have to be perfect for things to go south. It just takes one mistake. I was lucky that day, but the pilot in my next story wasn't. That one involves a fatal crash and a lesson every aviator needs to learn. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.